Good morning, everybody. It's your favorite aspiring revolutionary here, a wandering author, reminding you that we are all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same: spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. And today we are going over chapter number 2 and 3 of The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. So, chapter 2 is titled "Of the Principle Which Gives Occasion to the Division of Labor," or in other words, what causes labor to get divided. And Smith opens by saying the division of labor is not the consequence of any particular law, regulation, or force in society, but rather a result of human nature. Humans have a natural tendency to exchange and barter, which seems to be tied to our capacity for reason and language. All men partake in it, and it is suspiciously absent from every other species. When dogs work together while hunting down a rabbit, they are acting on their instincts, not fulfilling a contract. If a dog wants something, its only means of acquisition is to beg. Sometimes a man might do the same, but this is rare. We don't see too many beggars in our society, now do we? Even the most social men only have enough time to form a limited number of friendships in civilized society, despite all of us needing the same assistance and cooperation of others. Almost every animal is completely independent upon reaching maturity, in contrast, except for us humans. We require the constant cooperation of our brethren, and rarely do we expect it to come from their benevolence alone. By offering to barter or exchange, we show people it is in their own self-interest to cooperate. If you give me what I want, I will give you what you want in return. This is how we acquire almost everything in our culture today. The butcher, baker, and brewer do not supply our dinner because they are nice, but because they get something out of it. Smith says we are not addressing their humanity, but their self-love. And we do not speak of our necessities, but rather their advantages. Only beggars rely on kindness, and even they do not depend on it entirely. He still has to utilize barter and trade as he purchases what is needed with what has been given. Like once a homeless guy who is begging on the side of the road gets enough money in their cup, they take that money and then still do what everybody does and go to a store and barter and trade. The same principle that governs our disposition to trade also governs the division of labor. A tribesman may find he makes higher quality arrows than the rest of his tribe, and he may discover that trading these arrows can bring him more meat than if he went hunting himself. Out of his own self-interest, eventually he may become the tribe's arrow maker. Another member may be particularly good at building huts, and over time he may devote himself to this employment in the same way, becoming the village's hut maker. As time goes on, everyone in the tribe ends up specializing in their own natural talents to supply their needs following this principle. However, Smith tells us that the variation of natural talents in men is less than we suppose, often due to the division of labor itself. People develop specialized skills because the labor is already divided. When we consider a beggar and a philosopher, most of what makes them different is not because of nature, but habit and education. A doctor becomes a doctor because he went to school, not because he was born as a doctor, at least in Smith's view. As newborns, they were quite similar. Differences develop over a lifetime. Before trading was a thing, everyone had to acquire everything they needed on a daily basis. It is the disposition to trade that gave rise to a difference in talents in the first place. Sorry for the mistake right there. The differences between animals tends to be much greater than in mankind at birth, but animals do not benefit one another like us. Our specialization and tendency to trade makes it possible for us to contribute to a common stock, and we can obtain what we need from each other in a way that animals simply can't. Chapter 3, that the division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. The division of labor has limitations, and these limits are defined by the extent or power of the market. If we are dealing with a small market, no one can devote themselves to a particular employment because they are not able to produce enough, over and above their needs, and neither are others. Some occupations are only possible in a sufficiently developed market. For example, Semiconductor manufacturing would never be possible in a village. Even a small city could not support it alone. In small markets, people must learn to depend more on themselves. Isolated tradesmen must generalize in the country. A carpenter will do every type of work involving wood, even though specialists for a particular job may exist in the city, like turning of wood. Smith notes how access to shipping widens your market and opens new avenues of trade. For this reason, industry tends to develop, or at least historically tended to develop, along the coast and nearby navigable rivers. These industrial advancements may linger for some time before moving inland. Nowadays, we have the benefit of trains for like freight cars, as well as big rigs, 18-wheelers and stuff. So the development of inland areas is no longer limited by the same constraints that were present in Smith's time. During Smith's era, 2 men, 8 horses, and a wagon could ship 4 tons over 6 weeks between London and Edinburgh. 8 guys on a ship could transport 200 tons instead of 4 tons in the same time back then. In other words, using the sea was about 50 times more cost effective. You must also consider that many more men and animals would have to be involved in land transportation, further amplifying the costs. If there were only land transport, industry's development would have crawled. They simply could not have supported each other. Smith views water-based trade as a natural precursor to industry. It opens us up to global markets, and these forces are still at play today. The inland parts of a nation depend on their immediate surroundings for a market, and their markets exist in proportion to the prosperity of those around them. Smith also notes how the first civilizations to develop in well-authenticated history were based around the Mediterranean Sea, a view that is largely unchanged today. He believes the Mediterranean's tranquility contributed to the rapid development of nearby nations. Back in a time when sailors feared leaving sight of the shore, this place made navigation easy. Egypt appears to be where the first industrial and agricultural improvements took place. Their towns never extended more than a few miles from the Great Nile River, affording them great water communication, as Smith called it. Smith also comments on how similar developments occurred in Bengal and China, though less was known of them in the West at his time. Ancient Indians, Chinese, and Egyptians all relied on these waterways to fuel their early opulence and engaged in very little foreign trade. Africa, Siberia, and Tartary did not benefit from these types of waterways, and their development suffered as a result.